Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to advance in leadership, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is co-hosted by Nikki Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, senior corporate leader, ex-Googler, and diversity expert. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success. Hi, I'm Monica, your host for today's episode. From an early age, B. Pagels-Minor found the tech world to be an exciting place. And driven by that excitement, they started from the ground up with a job in technical support. B worked their way through well-known companies like Apple and Netflix to work today for a Fortune 100 company. Though B was always curious by nature, they didn't quite know what options they'd have to pursue as they figured out what they wanted to be when they grow up. B recognized that they can learn how to do anything with focus. However, they also realized that it was easy for them to procrastinate. So, in order to avoid procrastinating, B made a point of always over-delivering on their promises. B is an authentic person in everything they do. Their authenticity is vital in building community, which is extremely important for them. Join us in this fascinating discussion with B, a conversation that you wish wouldn't end. Visit iambeyondbarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode, including the best ways to get in touch with B. Welcome, B. Thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Barriers podcast. We are thrilled to have you here. Really want to dive in right away because we've been having an offline conversation, learning a lot about you. Super excited to share with our audience all the things that you are doing. So tell us a little bit about your story, your journey of how did B end up where B is today?
Yeah, so it's so weird. Like I often say that like most of my life feels kind of like an accident, right? How did if I had tried to predict that I would end up, in California, in LA, living amongst Hollywood elite, like I literally was at an event recently, and then I realized half the people on stage were people I'd watched in TV shows. I would have told you that you're absolutely insane, and that's partially because I'm originally from Mississippi, so I was born in Mississippi to a single mother who was amazing, and who eventually, she had a couple more kids. So I was the oldest of three kids there, and it was really kind of fascinating because my family's kind of divided into kind of like this. My mom's side of the family is very blue collar. My dad's side of the family is very white collar. And so I was really kind of brought up with this kind of idea that there's only two things you could do. So it was either work for the government because state jobs were very, very consistent and they were really great, or to become like a doctor. Like there's like literally there's no in between. And there's kind of a third. It was kind of like out there. It was like work in the church somehow. So my dad's a Baptist minister. So there's a lot of ministers in my family. But, they didn't actually believe anyone who was assigned female at birth should be a minister. Complicated. So this is a little bit of like the dichotomy that I started off with. And it wasn't really until I got into high school that a guidance counselor reached out to me and was just like, B, why are you only applying to like the University of Memphis or the University of Tennessee, places like that? And she was like, you're very smart. Like, you're very smart. And, she was also like, you're Black. And I was like, what does that mean? And she's like, and this is like a white guy's culture. She's like, I think you could apply to some of these other colleges. And not that I'm saying that you would only get in because of affirmative action, but your profile is very interesting. Like, you're a Black kid from Mississippi who's pretty smart. Try harder is basically what she was saying. Extend yourself. Yeah. So I applied and I actually ended up going to Duke my first 2 years of college before transferring to Northwestern. And it was actually, I ended up transferring to Northwestern because it was in a city. And so, when I was talking to my mom, I was like, I can't take these internships because, in order to take an internship, you'd have to like move to New York or you have to move to like California or something like that. And we were too poor. Like there was just no way economically because a lot of the internships, they expect you to move yourself and then you'll start getting a salary. And I was like, I don't have that. And so, my mom and I started talking amongst ourselves and we talked to some of my aunts and uncles and they were like, well, come to Chicago. You have family out in Chicago. And so during the summer, if you get an internship in Chicago, at the very least, you could stay with us. And so it started off with that's pragmatism. It's like, we don't have the same life as everyone else, but we can figure out how to still get you the same types of skills and same types of opportunities that you need to be successful. And it really was, going to Northwestern, doing those internships really was this game changer because I discovered there were a lot more careers besides government jobs, besides being a doctor, being a minister and things like that. And in fact, even though I actually applied to law school and started law school, I actually dropped out because I met someone in tech, and tech was just so interesting. I was like, this literally,
Yes.
it made my brain just like shoot off. Like I'm sure the electrons were just shooting in like every direction, because I was just like, this is exciting. Like, I love what this is. Like, it's not boring. I'm not reading a case that I disagree with, right? That other people agree with. And so like, let me figure out how to be in tech. And so I actually started off in the very lowest rungs of tech. So I started off in technical support. So imagine I was like explaining to people how to do control copy, right? Like, that's literally, I was like, Control C is how you copy this so that you can put this out here. And I kind of made my way up. And one day when I was there, my CTO reached out to me and was just like, hey, B, I'm tired of seeing all your emails about how our product is terrible. And I was like, but why? I was like, I just want to do the right thing for our customers. Like, how can we do the right thing? He was like, you should look into product management. And I was just like, okay, what's a product management? What does this do? And so I read, a bunch of books. Like, I started looking at Marty Kagan's blogs. Marty Kagan's like a huge product leader. And I was like, oh, this is exactly who I am, actually. I was like, I did not know this is who I was, but I am a product manager through and through, because I'm the type of person who, any type of website, any type of, hardware, if there's something on there, I'll just be like, but why did you make that decision? I was like, it makes more sense if you had done it this way. Like, because, the common denominator is I'm like very curious about how to create great experiences for people. And so from there, it just was an upward trajectory. So I started doing product management at that company, and I just like kind of continued to go on through other companies. So, I started off in Chicago working in a lot of the startups and a lot of the companies there. So Cars.com, Sprout Social. I got recruited out to California to work at Apple. Then I went over to Netflix, and now I'm kind of an independent person doing my own thing. But, what I really learned about that is that I need to be more curious, right? So starting with my guidance counselor, she's like, well, why haven't you investigated all your options? And I was just like, well, because I didn't know I was supposed to have options, right? And even having learned that lesson, I was like, wait, but. And so when my CTO came to me and said, well, you seem to have this personality, again, it was like, oh, wait, I really need to do a much better job of this, actually. Like, I really am missing out here, because like I need to be learning and teaching myself daily information so that I understand what all the possibilities are, so I could make reasonable and rational decisions for myself. And then also from a business perspective, it's just made me very, very invaluable, because like, I'm just curious about everything. Like, one of the things that, my leaders often say is, we can literally tell you to go figure out how to go to the moon. And if we give you a couple of weeks, you will figure out how to get us to the moon. And I think that's the cool thing about that. It's just completely changed, my brain and how my brain operates.
Wow, that's a phenomenal journey. And I love some of the things that you shared in terms of, one, the importance of curiosity, where, like you said, being curious was super important, because, you very much like there was a lot of parallels there, grew up with a very limited frame of reference of what success meant, right? Like you said, it was either become a doctor or, it was very narrow in terms of what success looked like. For me too, I grew up thinking that you had to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, because I grew up in West Texas where, petroleum engineering was the thing. And then you get to college and you realize, whoa, there's all of this other opportunity, right? And so being curious and not being afraid to step into those things are super important. Now, I know that, one of the things that you talk a lot about in your own kind of world and in your own consultant company is really thinking about authenticity, because like you said, you are also in tune of like who you were. You started learning when people were tapping you saying, hey, you might consider project management. But can you talk a little bit about how you gained that clarity in terms of really thinking about authentically, is this for you? How has that unleashed kind of success for you?
Yeah, it's so interesting, because so when I think about that first role, it was a company called Sharesa, which I love those. That whole team was great. I was there for almost 5 years. And when I was in that role, though, it's also when I was like really trying to become like both an adult. I was also kind of coming to terms with the fact that I was like, I'm a lesbian, but I'm also like in this point where I was just like, wait, I feel a little bit different though than even being a lesbian. And that's when I started to have this conversation with myself about being a trans person. And so, coming out as trans, non-binary as well. And so what's really interesting about that is that, so over a course from like 2013 to like 2016, I had like these tremendous transformations, because I realized I was like, I have been trying to fit within one part of myself, right? You know, like I was like, okay, in order to be successful professionally, even though I'm Black, like I need to be preppy. I need to look a certain way. I need to talk a certain way. Like I need to be so like I need to use all the big words. I can't use the vernacular that I actually was raised with, right? Even though that's exactly how I'm thinking about this. You know, I can't wear sneakers. Like I didn't wear Jordans. Like now I have so many Jordans, but I didn't wear Jordans because I was like, I don't want anyone to think that like I'm from the street and like I'm not a professional. You know, from a lesbian perspective, it's like even though like, you know, I'm a lesbian, I didn't use pronouns. Like I was one of those people. I was like, oh, I'm just my partner, like whatever. I was like using all this coded language. And then I also was trying to perform within, you know, the LGBT spectrum. I was trying to perform as like a masculine person because I was like, well, I do like boys' clothes. So like maybe I'm a stud, like, you know, so there was all these things that I was constantly doing to myself to put myself in a box to kind of like be to assimilate into what people expected of me.
Yes.
And what's happening is that like from a brain perspective, like from a mind perspective, I was spending, you know, half my time trying to pretend to be someone else. And the other half of the time actually trying to be successful at both professional and personal things. And the thing is, you can't do anything well if you're only spending 50% of your time on it. Right.
Yes.
And so going through and saying, actually, no, I am a Black, trans, non-binary lesbian who likes Jordans, who also likes tattoos, which I have a lot of tattoos now. I also started doing that afterwards. I also have facial piercings. I never had that before either. I was like, I'm just going to do what makes me happy. And so what ended up happening is that as I became my authentic self, I just became so happy. And so like I had so much energy that my work got better. Right. You know, it went from, oh, B is like a really hard worker to B is the strategic partner that I need to be successful. Right. So it went from, I have a project, let me ask B to execute on it too. I have this dream shot thing that I need help with, and I know that B can help me. And it's because I had the 100% of my brain to focus on that thing that I need to focus on. And I wasn't trying to pretend and be something else. And that's the thing that, you know, and it's actually really funny because I am a very analytical person. So actually, even though that's like, it sounds like this is like this, you know, this light bulb went off, I actually created a list. So I had a pros and cons list. I was like, what are the pros of B? What are the cons of B? And so when I first made that list, there was a whole bunch of cons on there. And so I started looking at those cons. I was like, well, you know, not comfortable with their identity. And so I was like, well, so what the heck do I have to do to get comfortable with my identity? And like, I steeped myself in my community, like my LGBTQ community. I steeped myself in my Black community. And then I was like, oh, I'm getting all this love, right? You know, when one of the other things, like I was always really poor, like I was really bad at following through. Right. It wasn't because I didn't want to follow through. It's just that if someone didn't say, hey, B, you know, did you do that thing? And I would just wouldn't. I was like, well, they don't care about it. It's like, and now it changed it. I was like, well, even if they don't follow through on it, I'm going to always do what I said I'm going to do because that's part of the character that I want to have. This is this authentic person that I want to be, is that a person who always follows through, who always does exactly what they say they're going to do. And then I became like this person that everyone's like, well, you know, every time someone would think of something, they're like, let's ask B, right? Because B always, like, we can always trust, we have faith in them. And so it's also that like little bit of that due diligence to understand who you are, right? Because like a lot of people, I think, go through the world and they don't challenge that. They don't have that conversation with themselves of saying, am I a version of myself that I like? And it's like, you may not be, and that's okay. And the question just becomes, how can you put together a plan to get yourself to that version that you would like to be? And I'm going to be truthful. If I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be married. I wouldn't have a kid. I wouldn't have a great career. I wouldn't have been invited on this podcast because, you know, the reason I was invited on this podcast is because we're a mutual friend. And it's because, you know, she and I have worked together and we've been friends together. And it's because we have that relationship. So the authenticity is really the foundation of so much so much greatness that you can have in your life.
Wow, that's phenomenal. And, you know, I geek out just like you, but I'm all about I'm into the research and the statistics myself, my background in DEI, but also how adults learn and other things. But your story actually kind of like solidifies a lot of the research where they say, Sylvia Ann Hewlett's research on the power of out, that individuals who aren't having to cover, who can be their authentic selves and can be out in the workplace, are actually 30% more productive because, like you said, we're not worried about censoring the language that we're using or remembering, like, what did I tell so-and-so? But the most important thing is trust. Because if you are kind of hiding a part of yourself from your direct manager or from your peers, and they sense like something's off, or like there's just some sort of wall and they can't break through it, you miss out on the trust that sometimes leads to opportunities and all of those things. And so I love how you said, really having that introspection and understanding yourself, which is the most important thing, of like gaining that clarity on, what do you want to be known for? What do you love to do? Like, what are your passions and all of those things? And I think the story that you just shared so beautifully of just really stopping the brain from trying to fit into all of these, preconceived notions of what we should be, right? And all of these labels that we should be. And so I love your what you're teaching about authenticity, of just being yourself and leading with yourself. And it unlocks so much of that potential, because like you said, you're not wasting that brain power on all of these other things. That's phenomenal. But can you tell me a little bit about, because we all have our own journeys, right? I myself, coming from a small town, West Texas, very traditional Mexican-American family, oldest and only daughter, and myself struggling with the identity of being a lesbian, and needing to leave the conservative kind of West Texas town that I was living in, moving to New York City, and, thinking that I could be my authentic self and be out. But then you run into all of these other kind of like fears and limiting beliefs that you place on yourself. What are some of the ways that, did you struggle with that? And if so, how did you get past or overcome those fears and limiting beliefs?
Yeah. Honestly, fear is a bastard, that jerk, right? Because he comes up when you least expect it. So first and foremost, I think the thing that you have to remember is it happens constantly. So even once you think you've overcome one fear, there's always something else. Like right now, I'm a new parent. I'm so worried about so many things, right? It's like, am I going to be good at this? Thank you. It's like, am I going to be good at this? Am I going to be bad at this? Like, what do I have to do? Like, whatever. So like fear is a constant thing. And so I think first and foremost, like the number one thing I've tried to do is surround myself with people who remind me of who I am, right? Who remind me, it's like, you've had a lot of stuff happen to you in your life, and you figured out how to do it every single time. So, that's the first thing. Have a squad, have, your personal, board of directors who you can go to, who remind you of who you are and that you have that ability to overcome. And then also who will also be those people who, when it feels debilitating, because sometimes fear can feel debilitating. It really makes your whole body ache because it's so scary, right? Who will also kind of just be those people that, I'm going to come over, we're going to have some food, we're going to have some drinks, I'm going to hug you real tight so that I can help you have that fear leave your body. So that's first and foremost, have that type of community around you. But then secondly, this is, it's a great thing to document, So I have a tendency, like, even if it's like an email that I got from someone saying, hey, B, like, like it's crazy that you were able to accomplish this thing. I go back to that personal catalog, right? So when I'm like, oh, I don't feel like I can do this, I'm like, wait, but look at this. It's like 1, 2, 3. And the thing is, no matter who you are, you've had someone tell you something like this, right? Even if it was just, if you were at the church function and you came through with the ice when no one else even thought about the ice, someone probably sent you a text saying, I know, I appreciate you for always being the one who comes through. Like, go back to that personal, actually first document it, and then go back to that personal catalog of how you've been great over time, because it's always a really great mechanism. And again, I mentioned that example of ice because sometimes people think it's big things. The thing is, it's actually sometimes really hard to show up every day for little things. So it actually is a big deal if you're like, it's a big deal to just show up, period. And it's not necessarily about, I launched this big multi-million-dollar campaign. It's like, no, I got my kid to stay asleep while I changed his diaper and transition him straight back into bed. That is a huge accomplishment.
It's a huge accomplishment, yeah.
Document it, because that's part of it, right? So it's that constant reminder of how you've accomplished things in the past, and that is what you have to use when you have this fear that bastard comes up and tells you can't do something again because you've accomplished something. And also, let's just be truthful. If you're any type of minority in America and you're reasonably happy, you are legitimately you're in the top 1% of humans, right? Like, because you've had a lot of things that are coming at you any given day, especially in these days. And so the fact is that you have to keep going back to, who am I? What have I done? What am I going to do tomorrow? Because I already have this whole track record of all this excellent things that I've already done. And then lastly, I will say, sometimes the world tells us like really, really weird information. And so even, with my personal board of directors, even with my, catalog of accomplishments, what I have to remember is it's like what my mama told me when I was first born and every day of my life. And she said, you are loved. You are my baby. There's nothing you can do that will ever destroy that. Right. And so that's the other thing about it. There's always going to be like that one person that like, that's the message that you actually should be listening to. Right. So, go out and seek that one person. Now that's for me, it's my wife. So my wife is my biggest cheerleader now. And so like, she says the same thing. I was like, actually, that's probably why I married her. I was like, she says the same thing my mom said. Okay. So, but that's the thing, also like, there's that totem pole person, that person who's like all the storms, like the hurricane is coming. And in the center, you see that one person. Try to find that one person, who can also help recenter you in that moment too. And then also have that, like, because what I do is I hear her voice, right? And even as I hear those other things, all I can really hear is her, because that's the thing that actually matters.
That's beautiful. And that strength of the pillar that you're always kind of going back, that kind of centers you. But I love what you said about the greatest hits list. So we're a firm believer at Beyond Barriers as well as the greatest hits list and I tell people, go back to like kindergarten, pre-K, like the awards that you were getting of like, perfect attendance or whatever it may be, kind of like, showing all of these things that, yes, you can do that. And in those moments of self-doubt, like going back and reading that list and then like getting kind of re-empowered, right? That, yeah, I can do that. Here's this greatest hits list. And you kind of constantly keep adding to it. I think those are amazing techniques. Now, I want to go back. You mentioned something where when you talked about how when you were redefining yourself, B, and coming up with your kind of like your brand and what you wanted to be known for. And you talked about that follow through of maybe in the past you hadn't been that person following through, but you wanted to be that, right? What were some of the techniques or what were the habits and rituals that kind of helped you establish that? Like, what did you do to kind of shift that mindset and say, I want to shift that perception or create that, or, perception is reality, right? Create that perception that then becomes the reality of B is the go-to.
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, like I said, it started off with the list, right? Like I had to create the list of cons to understand first, like, what things do I even need to change, right? And so follow through was a huge one of those. Second was about how I made people feel. So my natural personality is actually kind of like a little bit standoffish. Like, so actually my therapy is great, by the way. Y'all should check it out. It's amazing. Yeah. My therapist is like, you're actually a huge teddy bear. Like, you love everybody. Yes. But because you love everybody, you get very disappointed when people are not who they say they're going to be. And so she was like, you're very standoffish because of this. And I was like, okay, but so I wanted to be able to be my natural self, my authentic self, which is a teddy bear, but also still create boundaries, right? To be successful in life, stuff like that. So those are kind of like two examples of really big things that needed to change. So from the following through, if I meet someone now, for instance, like I get their information, like, so either one, like I'll connect with them immediately on LinkedIn. If we exchange phone numbers, I'll follow up and say, hey, here's a text message from me. And if there's something that we've agreed to, I'll say, no, by the way, we've agreed that I'm going to follow up and put something on the calendar. If it's, email, I'll send an email immediately and say, thank you so much for meeting, blah, 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 blah. So first and foremost, it's do it quickly, right? Yes. Don't give yourself time to think about it. Don't give yourself time to forget about it. Just do it quickly, because as soon as you do it, you have done the follow through. So like I've accomplished the thing that I've said, right? So that's the first thing. I mean, let's say on the flip side of it, it was cleanliness. Again, I know that my natural inclination is to procrastinate. So when I wash clothes, I literally bring them into the room wherever I am and I fold them as I watch TV, because if I don't, they will be there for a week or two, right? And they will not get done, right? So I have to do it immediately. in terms of like, the wanting to be more approachable and being someone that people want to be around,
Mm-hmm.
I explain to people who I am. I'm like, hey, this is who I am. Like, I'm a lot. Like, I could be your best friend. We're going to be family, like, blah, 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 blah. Or I could just be your colleague, and I could just be the person who we have a business relationship. But we kind of establish what that looks like. So then I have this ability to kind of, to perform friendship, if that's what I'm supposed to be performing, or if I can perform a business relationship. And so it makes it a lot easier for me to be my authentic self and be like very approachable to those folks. Right. And so it's all about creating these mechanisms that you can do it in the moment for me. So like, I'm not a person who like, I'm going to figure this out later. It's like, no, in the moment, I'm going to do this because I've created this system that says instant action creates the most success for me. Right.
Yes.
And it's really worked really effectively for me long term.
I love that instant action. I actually probably need to take a page out of your book because I think you described me in some of those instances where if I don't do it right away, it's gone. Right. And so really I tell myself, oh, I'll get to that in a minute. But if the minute goes by and it turns into a week and then I've kind of lost all a concept of time. So thank you for sharing that, because it's super important of like just having a bias towards action and holding yourself accountable. I think that's the most important thing, is like you are now holding yourself accountable to do that. I think that's fantastic. I want to talk a little bit about community, because you touched on that a little bit when it came to the talking about overcoming fears and really having that pillar and identifying that person who can kind of help center you, but then also really thinking about the people who surround you in your board of directors, which is so important. Can you talk a little bit about, the steps to building kind of that strategic, kind of powerful board of directors and how you leverage them in terms of mentorship versus sponsorship in some cases?
Yeah, it's so funny because I'm not bad at it, but I think I actually have gotten a lot better about it. So there's actually this person that I met a few years ago when I first moved to Apple. Her name is Lexi Butler. So Lexi Butler's she's the best person I've ever seen in building community. And so I'm going to describe a little bit what she does, because I feel like I've tried to emulate a lot of what she does. So first and foremost, what I love about her is that she goes into relationships with no expectations, right? It may become a friendship. It may become, a business thing, or it may be that you'll never meet that person again, right? But she treats them all it's just like, I am a human in front of you. I think you are a human in front of me. Let's have a conversation. So that's first and foremost. So having no expectation, I think, is great, because I think sometimes when you put expectations in relationships, it creates the possibility they could go really left, right? So for instance, I might meet someone, like, especially being in LA now, you really don't know who you're going to meet. But let's say I'm out at like a VC dinner or something like that. And presumably most of the people at that VC dinner are potentially people who have money or who are investors, like whatever.
Right.
But at the same time, it also could be that one of those people is just a founder who's down on their luck, who's just really charming, that you want to meet. And so the thing is, if you go in without having any expectations of who you're going to meet, and you're just like, I just want to meet humans, that's a really great first step. And so that's the first thing. Just look at people as people and don't try to put anything else on them, right? That's the first thing. Secondly, what I really love about how she operates it is that she is literally an open book, right?
Yes.
She's willing to have any conversation with you. If you're in front of her and you want to talk about, the state of tech, she can do that. If you want to talk about abortion rights, she can do that, right? Because she's comfortable. Like, she has her opinions. She can't be moved from her opinions. I'm very similar in that way. And I think that that's important, because I think that also, I can agree to disagree with you, right? Like, but we can have really authentic conversations and it feels good, right? Because when you leave a conversation with me, you're like, I like, be a real one. Like, I don't feel like I have to pretend or be someone who I'm not around them. And so I feel like that's super, super effective. And the third thing is the following up, right? So, even when it's like, let's say if it's a blasé conversation, but I'm just like, well, this person was like pretty cool. And we were in a situation that was very busy. It's like, whatever, but they seemed like interesting. I will follow up. I'm like, I found you on LinkedIn. You gave me your phone number, you gave me your email. Let me follow up with you. Let's have it like in one-on-one, like coffee chat. And a lot of times those coffee chats are really profound, right? Like, there's been some of those coffee chats where I was just like, you did not come across like this at all, that event. But I had a feeling if I just had a conversation with you later, like, It was going to be great. You were so great. I love it. Like, I want to be your best friend now. This is really, really awesome. Right. And so, it's just, it's very simplistic. Now, the one thing about that, let's say on the flip side, there's some people that you meet where you're just like, absolutely not. However, as you talk to them, you're just like, wait, but that person, like, like I'm listening to them but their business is really interesting. Right. Like, I want to learn more about their business. And so sometimes, like, the person in front of you is not the person you end up with, like, that's a part of your personal board of directors. But because they have a cool thing that they're doing, let's say you continue to follow up with them and you meet that person where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy I met that other person because they introduced me to this other person. So that's the other thing about that. Like, sometimes conversations in the moment don't feel that real or that significant. But then later on, they actually create so much more positivity from it. So it's also like not shutting down conversations. Right. I might meet Elon Musk tomorrow. Elon Musk and I, based on what I see on Twitter, we're probably not going to agree on many things. Yeah. But if he wanted to take me over to SpaceX and we could talk about space, I bet I would have a really great time. Right. Yes, exactly. And so that's the thing. It's like there's always that nuance of like how relationships can develop in ways that you can never predict. Right. And so that's just really cool. And then once you kind of have these actual relationships, it's like, how do you convert them into like long-term? And again, it's like that continuing follow up. I primarily just like, so right now I've moved a few times. So majority of my friends and the people who I've been following my personal board of directors don't live in the same city with me. So we can't go get coffee. We can't go get drinks. Right. We're not going to get dinner. But what we are going to do is we're going to be sending, text messages with news articles, with memes, with updates about our family, our friends, I'm going to be asking like, how's your career going? Like things like that. So it's like also that constant conversation. I like to say that when you're a part of my community, like the conversation never ends. Like there's never any hi and goodbye. Like in fact, actually I often do not say hi and goodbye to people, period. Like, cause I'm just like, no, the conversation is going to keep going. It's never an end for us. Right. Yeah. It's a constant relationship that is always valuable to me. And I try to make sure people understand that it's very valuable to me to have them in my life. And when I say value, it's not, monetary value. It's just like, you give me life, right? Like being around you and having you in my life gives me more life. And that's the reason I want you around me.
I love that. What if you could pinpoint the invisible ceilings limiting your success? Imagine having clarity on your strengths and barriers so you can take action and gain unstoppable momentum to advance as a future-ready leader. Well, that's exactly what the Beyond Barriers quiz will help you discover. You'll get your personalized score based on the 25 essential elements proven to accelerate success in the digital age, so you can understand what's holding you back and where to focus your efforts. The Beyond Barriers quiz is completely free and takes just a few minutes. Go to iambeyondbarriers.com/quiz and take the quiz today. Now, you practice what you preach. You are truly authentic in that. One of the questions that I'm sure, that popped in my head that I'd probably get from some of our, our women in our programs is sometimes with authenticity is that fear of likability. Will people like the authentic me? Or if I'm too opinionated, or if I just tell them this is what I like, this is what I don't like, the whole thing of like needing to please or likability. What do you have to say to that? Because I have a feeling what you'll have to say is very interesting around that idea of authenticity and likability.
Yeah, it's actually so funny because so I go back. So first, you hit the nail on the head a little bit earlier when you talked about trust. So when you're not authentic, people really don't trust you. And so that means that what you say can be perceived in very different ways, right? Yes. So like the thing is, I can say something that's kind of harsh that makes people squirm. But because I'm so authentic, they know I'm not coming from a negative place. Like they know that I'm literally stating a fact, right? It's not a personal, dig at them. It's not anything like that. It's like, no, I can trust what B says. And so like, if B says my business plan sucks, it's not meant in a negative way. It's like, and because they know that like, I'm giving you information to make you better, make you more successful. Right. So that's the first thing. So that trust thing is super important, but also likability is complicated, right? Because people think likability is you agree with people. And the simple fact is we as humans, we don't evolve that much more from when we're babies to a certain extent. Like we have more intelligence. We can communicate. We can make poor decisions, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But as a baby, all you really want is for someone to give you boundaries, right? You want
Mm-hmm.
someone who's going to help you. It's like, no, you can't crawl off the couch, baby, because you're going to fall and hit your head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's an
Yeah.
act of love. Like that boundary is an act of love. And it's an act of, I care about you. And so what I found is that I could be like really harsh with someone and they freaking love it because they're like, B, you care about me. You do not want me to fail. You want me to
Yes.
be successful. And so that's the thing. Like, obviously, like, there's a lot of that perception. It's like, oh, well, people think I'm a bitch because I said blah, 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 blah. I'm like, well, they probably, well, one, first and foremost, who's a person, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you may not have a relationship whatsoever with that person, right? And then secondly, you can look at that person sometimes and you can say, that person has not done the due diligence to be curious, to look at how the world operates, to think about what I'm actually trying to say. And so you can't really use that as a barometer for your own likability, because that's the other part of this. It's like, one, if you become like this authentic person who can be trusted, you can have these very difficult conversations with lots of people. On the flip side of that, the other person on the side of the table, if they haven't done a lot of that stuff, right, or they're a
Mm-hmm.
part of a group of people who have a tendency not to be curious, it's not you, it's them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's the other thing about that. So likability is, I would say, don't worry about being likable, right? Because
Yes.
popularity and likability are two separate things, right? You could be very popular and not liked by a lot of people,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
But it's not very often that you can be unpopular and be liked, right? And so I always tell people, like, I'm probably like the class president, right? Like, a lot of people will vote for me. Not everyone is always happy with everything I'm saying to them, right? Because I have very difficult conversations with people because I care about people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want people to fail. But the simple fact is, I will still probably be class president because people continue to say, like, actually, it's so this is so I've worked in tech. So I've worked with engineers and
Yeah.
people be like, B, sometimes I feel like you're my parent who's like spanking me all the time. And I'm like, yes, because I feel like I need to be your parent who spanks you all the time because you can be so great. You can be so great. I don't understand why you're not trying to be as great as you can be. And it's my job as someone who loves up on people to help you reach your greatness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, I'm not always likable. And I would tell people to get rid of this notion of being liked, right? Because being liked
Yes.
is not really the goal, because when you're trying to be excellent, it doesn't always work. I mean, Hillary Clinton, the reason she's excellent is not because people like her. I mean, a lot of people don't like Hillary Clinton, but she's right. Same thing about Elizabeth Warren. Elizabeth Warren is the most, honestly, I just want to go hang out and have coffee with Elizabeth Warren because I bet you I could tell her 5 things about my life and she'd have a plan for me to supercharge it. That
Yeah.
woman is just like so smart, so talented, but she's not always liked, but she's
Right.
excellent. So I would say try to be excellent. And then
Mm.
you'll be the class president, and that's better than being the class clown who agrees with everyone.
I love that. I love that. Be excellent and not the class clown. I love it. So I could talk for hours, but I know that we've got to bring this to a close. So I'm actually really excited to ask you our lightning round questions that we ask everyone in closing, because I think these also kind of give you an insight that maybe we wouldn't have known otherwise. So what book has greatly influenced you?
Yeah, so there's just one. It's Inherit the Wind. So Inherit the Wind is the book about the Scopes trial. So it's about like evolution versus the Bible's
right.
version of it. But what I love about that book at the end is that the attorney who won the case actually had sympathy for the attorney who lost the case had sympathy for the one who won the case, because they basically said that person needed it. And I just remember thinking, so sometimes winning isn't the point. Sometimes it's about how you treat other people.
Oh, wow. I love that. I'm going to have to write that one down and get it. Next question. What is your favorite inspiring quote or saying?
Yeah, so I actually have this one tattooed on my arm. So there's a book called The Little Prince. It's my favorite book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And it's so the quote is, and now here's my secret, a very simple secret. It's only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is visible to the eye. So again, I'm a very heart-focused person, so it just makes sense that that's something that really resonates for me.
I love it. What is one word or moniker you would use to describe yourself?
Truth teller.
Ah, yes. I love that. I always tell people in their network, you need the friends that are going to love on you and lift you up, but you also need the truth teller. and for all the reasons that you shared in the podcast of, you know, that person cares for you the most and is actually going to bring out the best in you. I love it. What is one change, habit, behavior, action that you implemented and it made your life better?
So I already mentioned, you know, always following up. So maybe the thing that I would say for this one is actually trying to read one news article a day.
Yeah. Open up the perspectives. That's right. Mm-hmm. So this one's my favorite. So, all right, B, you're walking out on stage. There's a few thousand people. What song will be playing in the background as you walked out onto the stage?
So actually, this is really easy because this is the song that plays every time I do a keynote. It's called Queen by Janelle Monáe, and Erykah Badu is on there too. That song just gets me going every single time. I love it. I'm going to have to make a list of all of our podcast guest, stage songs. I think it's going to be a powerful, powerful playlist. Oh yeah. The Beyond Barriers, playlist, that would be amazing. Yes, definitely. It's on the list. We're going to do it now. Well, B, thank you so much for all of this time. You have been phenomenal. And I know for a fact we get this all the time where, you know, people will reach out and say, oh my God, I loved B and everything they had to say. How do I get in touch with them? How do I follow them? How do I get more of B? Yeah, so first and foremost, everyone on the internet, I'm just B Pagels-Minor. So Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, B Pagels-Minor. Also, one of my colleagues and I, we just launched a podcast called The Drops Podcast. If you go to Anchor, you'll find all the different links that we're listed at. But basically, the podcast is just trying to give practical business advice because we just got tired of being advisors for companies and realizing that they weren't following business principles. So we launched this podcast and hopefully it's helpful to some people. I love it. Well, B, let us know how we can be helpful to you and your podcast. We'll put the links on our website along with this episode. And again, thank you for your time. And I look forward to connecting with you, having coffee, getting to know you and learning more from you and learning to be authentic in every way. So thank you again for all of your time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Barriers podcast. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and tell a friend about it. And subscribe to get new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes, links, and the best way to connect with our guests. See you next episode.